Hi, everyone, and welcome to this next panel of the day. I'm Devin Maguire, Product Marketing Manager at Cycode, and your host for this discussion. I'm delighted to welcome three security heavyweights driving impact through their application and product security programs. Linda, Brad, Jacob, welcome to the virtual stage.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm really excited for this session and hearing your unique perspectives on the next generation threats our industry needs to be alert to and prepared for. And for security leaders, it's a perpetual challenge to anticipate emerging risks and stay ahead of them, especially as technologies and development practices evolve at breakneck speeds and new threats emerge with that. So we're here to discuss next generation threats, and it's kind of impossible to have that conversation right now without talking about AI. So Jacob, I actually want to start with you from a CISO perspective. What are the most significant new threat vectors and attack patterns emerging due to the increasing use and prevalence of AI in software development and deployment?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that frankly keeps me up at night these days. But really, I see two major ones that are impacting both those areas. So for software development, it's really about AI model poisoning, and I don't think we really understand what that really can manifest yet, but that's something I really think about as we're using these tools, using AI to create code or manage our data in some way. How has that been trained, or what are the subtleties or like hallucinations that it could possibly have that could manifest in some way that's unsafe for use, especially in the world of medical device that I work in. The other, and this is what I think about more in the deployment standpoint, is really the attacks that can happen against an AI model, right? We still haven't explored all of that. And once these really crafty and clever attackers get a hold of this and start figuring out how to make inferences or trick it to behave in a way that's not appropriate, how we're really going to manage that is just going to be layers upon layers of security we have to put in place. So those are the two that I really think about and keep me up at night, frankly.
Yeah, so we're saying kind of AI introducing kind of these new categories of risk as organizations adopt the technology and even kind of develop AI products and leverage LLMs. Another interesting aspect is also just the impact of AI on development velocity and the use of AI coding assistants, the era of the 10x developer. So Linda, from a application and product security perspective, how does this introduction of both kind of a new risk categories that Jacob was talking about and also the increased development velocity, how does that kind of impact risk, and can traditional application and product security approaches keep pace with that?
I think and Jacob hit on, some of the new issues, model poisoning. We've got a whole new OWASP top 10 focused on LLMs out there. So a whole new category of risks, but then also you've got all this code coming out, so much faster now, and again, it's been trained on what's available. So that's not necessarily the most secure. So it's not just, we're not getting necessarily quality out of it, but we're getting this quantity. And so trying to keep up with that is a lot. You've also got a lot of, older code. So maybe that code that it was trained on that the AIs are spitting out vulnerable, but it may have been fixed. Well, your LLMs aren't up to date, with the most current version. It's got something, 6 months to a year old. So it's just, we've got a lot of that, secure code issues still out there, but at, 10x speed from what we had before. So trying to keep pace with that is a challenge.
Sure. Yeah. Brad, anything to add, expanding on that era of AI generated code and new risks?
Yeah, certainly. AI, it's a great technology. It has accelerated developers a lot faster than it has accelerated us. So, at the management level, we like to use ratios to kind of get right the number of security engineers to developers, kind of have a sense of where we're at. I think, the standard right now is like 1 to 80, 1 to 100. But if every developer is making significantly more code, we're going to put a lot of pressure on that ratio. So a lot more to learn there.
Yeah, so going from 1 to 80, 1 to 100, but if you have a 10x developer, then that ratio suddenly looks much worse, for sure. Yeah, so we've started to touch on kind of new risk categories, the potential for AI to both kind of introduce these new categories and stress traditional security challenges of keeping pace. I'm curious, can AI help? Is there a role that AI has to play in, identifying, analyzing, and mitigating both these kind of next generation new category of threats, but also to kind of keep pace with that perpetual skills gap and challenge of security pace versus development pace. So Jacob, I'll throw it to you. What's your take on that?
Yeah, sure. That it certainly can. I mean, I use it significantly for my own research and education. But yeah, the challenge that I've seen is that, especially security professionals who are typically very risk averse, have to be able to embrace it, right? And once you do embrace it, you can 10x your education and knowledge and understanding. You can develop quickly AI-powered tools that can scan code, detect vulnerabilities, flag threats, find all of those novel and hidden issues that we've talked about earlier. But then the other sort of big piece of it, this is something that I am a big proponent of, is actually enabling other parts of the business, or even developers or other parts of engineering, to be able to do the kind of security work themselves, because they'll have this, you could possibly have a security assistant, I would say, that can really help the developers make better decisions earlier, which then downstream, if they are 10xing, we wouldn't have to 100x to be able to meet the demand of all the code they're pushing out. They've already done a lot of work up front that makes our job easier. That's the kind of two areas I'm starting to look in and try to get at least the people around me to embrace and take on those different avenues.
Yeah, can we jump in there?
Yeah, I think it's not quite the right question, Devin. I think the question is, how is AI going to change the way security, and especially application security, is practiced altogether? 3-5 years from now, we're going to have to see developers not as individuals writing codes, but as managers of AI teams, whose job it will be to fill out individual branches or individual features. And on that team, you'll have a development model, you'll have a testing model, and one of those models may even well be a security model. So the question is more like, 3-5 years from now, will doing, application scans, for example, against a static code of rules like we do with checkmarks or fortify or sneak, will that still be a relevant concept, or will the AI be doing that for us? And if that's the case, where does a security team add value?
Yeah, Linda, curious where you kind of fall on this spectrum of, AI risks, but also there are these tools and kind of emerging collaborators. AI is kind of a collaborator, and developers as these orchestrators of AI teammates.
I think the general consensus is really that you need to think of AI as more like a junior engineer. So it can do some of the easier stuff, but you still have to verify a lot of what it does. So from a security perspective, you can train it on some of the, more, simple tasks, or the, constantly closing out your false positives or things like that. As it matures, I think you'll see better scanning results. So a lot of the, Brad alluded to some of the current SaaS tools out there. They're still looking for very signature-based things, very specific. So your AIs can get a lot more context in that. And as they mature, I think we'll be catching a lot more stuff and get a lot more true positives out of it from that perspective. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to get there.
All right. What are the gaps between where we are now and where you think we need to be?
I can jump in on that one.
Sure.
I think, we have to be super surgical about how we use our time. And what that's going to end up meaning, one way or the other, is getting better at threat modeling. Right now, we spend so much time working our way down lists of vulnerabilities and spreadsheets generated by tools, when our real risk might even be in a place that a tool can't find. So we need to be really good at understanding where is the risk in this product we're making.
That's exactly right. Actually, that's my philosophy as well, is that finding all this after the fact and sifting through thousands and thousands of lines of vulnerabilities is not going to do it. And it's upfront. But then I think to that same point is that can AI, an agent, or a security model really handle that threat modeling like a human can? Right? I think there's still a really big gap in that space that needs to be figured out. But that's where you get the most impact, to Brad's point.
Yeah, and Jacob, just bouncing right off of that, we've done a lot of work in that space. Various security folks have. I mean, Adam Shostak, who invented the CVE, tried to figure out, could we use AI for threat modeling? No, like we just can't. He found nothing.
Yeah.
So, the answer to the question we're asking, Devin, is the value of a security team is going to be in threat modeling. I think the remaining question is exactly how is that going to integrate into security processes today that outside of the med tech and government spaces don't really do this a whole lot.
I mean, this
Yeah, and I have
specific to kind of
just
threat modeling. Oh, please, Wendy. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say, just to touch on that a little bit more, I think the AI will help in like pulling all that information together so that your security engineers can look through it. But at the end of the day, there's still that like human review, human judgment on it to kind of, see where the real issues lie.
Yeah, and kind of thinking about AI and emerging threats is kind of the trust boundaries that are associated with that. How do you see kind of threat modeling itself needing to kind of evolve or adapt? It's obviously going to remain a human skill, but I'm curious what needs to change between how we're doing threat modeling now and how does that need to, I guess, adapt for these new emerging risks? All right.
What are you thinking?
I mean, a big one. Just speaking pragmatically or practically, machine readable output. When you fit us a threat model and you have it all written up, give it to a AI in a way it can process it for you and tell you where you should be focusing. Right? It's a pretty. That's at least what I see as a big one. And then additionally, is the models we use now, like Stride or Pasta or Octave, need to extend to include all these novel attack spaces that we're not aware of in AI yet, like inference, and they kind of can translate over here and there to like spoofing or tampering and whatnot, but it really needs to be thought through a bit more on those ends. What AI in a deployment would really mean from a security perspective. Sorry, go ahead. Brad, you got something to say? I'm sure.
Oh, I do. It's. I think it's even more than that, Jacob. I'm not even sure this question is functionally dependent on AI. I think just as an industry, we're not very good at this whole threat modeling thing. I think it's just a skill we managed to lose over the past 20 years. And that's kind of troubling. I think we as humans first need to get to the point where we can do a threat model and then 6 months later pick it up and find it useful before we can start talking about how AI can help us with that.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a good point. Like, it's not just kind of AI. I think it's kind of easy to be myopic about AI issues and talking about AI-related risks. But I'm curious, beyond AI, are there kind of emerging risks that you're tracking or particularly concerned about? Jacob, as a CISO, I'm sure there are innumerable risks, but I'm curious which ones come top of mind.
Well, I'm in the med tech space, and we have, safety as a concern, and we also have long-lived devices that are out of our control, more or less, once they leave our building. And so I think about, it's still kind of on the far horizon, but I think about post-quantum computing, what that's going to look like in terms of how we encrypt and manage all of this. But that's not really the most imminent. What I'm more concerned about is not really AI itself, but the outcomes that AI will create, which is a lot of things we talked about the speed, about the somebody vibe coding a banking app, for example, right? And then everyone uses it and it's completely insecure. So there's so many things that are going to be the outcome of this velocity and this kind of new, almost democratization of software development that I think what I'm kind of watching out for. Especially, I've really been concerned about a lot of the SaaS vendors that start to show up at the company from other business units. They want to come in and bring in this new software that was built 6 months ago by a bunch of juniors in high school who just used Cursor to do it, and that's concerning to me. They don't understand the full stack. I guarantee they didn't do any threat modeling, right, as part of that assessment of their tool. And that is something that I'm really facing, is the supply chain, and this third party risk is my biggest concern.
Yeah, I think all of that is pertinent. Although I actually want to disagree a little bit, Jacob. Having had the immense pleasure of reading lots of code that's been generated by AI, I actually don't think it's that bad. I really don't think, especially for more recent models, code that's been vibe coded or generated by AI, boy, I'm sorry, I'm not that old. It does not seem to be more secure or less secure than code written by a human. It's kind of just like the average of that. I think the bigger threat is that there's going to be so much more of it for us to handle than that it's going to be introducing new or unique threats.
Interesting.
I think kind of adding to that, there's still, whether it's good or not, there's a lot of blind trust in what's being generated by the AIs, So when you have, a non-coder trying to do vibe coding or your juniors just doing it, they don't necessarily know if it's good or not. And there's just a lot of blind trust in it. So there's a lot of stuff out there that they don't know or don't know how to, because they haven't come up in the traditional, software development, coding, and understanding that.
So as you had things like, vibe coding and developers using AI tools, does that kind of governance of these tools become part of the product and application security realm and kind of controls and visibility into that? I guess we'll start there, and then I guess, Jacob, you also talk about kind of third-party supply chain attestation of how these things are developed. Maybe we'll go there next, but Wendell, we'll start with you, I guess, on kind of governance of AI tools in the development process.
I think it needs to fall into your product security, AppSec controls. And then at the same time, any of that code that comes out still needs to follow your traditional, security testing. So whether that's your SAST, your DAST, your, SCA scamming, threat modeling, putting it all through. And again, getting past that blind trust, it still needs to have the additional testing and controls like anywhere else. Because even before AI, we've had people copying off of Stack Overflow and putting it out there, and so it's just that AI is accelerating where all that code is coming from.
The primary threat I see with AI generated code is more legal than security related. So, all security is just input and output, right? So let's talk about input and output. The input is code coming into your system that may come from another system that may be secure, it may not be secure, it may be copyrighted or patented, it may not be. And you do need a way to control for that and to look for those things. And then on the other side of it, if you're doing proprietary things in your code and you're using a model that's learning from what you're writing, well, your code base could end up in someone else's code base. So important to kind of know both of those things. So to that end, Devin, I think, security needs to be at the table, certainly, but this is a more cross-functional issue than that.
Yeah, that's how we're approaching it at my company as well. It actually was initially driven by legal because they had these exact concerns about what's going to happen with our code. Are we using, licensing that we're not supposed to? But there are still some security risks that are concerning to me. The one is this new concept, like this is just an idea. And this is where I think these novel vulnerabilities are going to come from, is the idea of slop squatting, that it just pulls in some third-party dependency that is actually written by completely not validated or vetted or anything. We have processes downstream to manage that, but that's like just an example of the sort of, I like the name of it is very well contrived, slop squatting. There's a lot of sloppiness that is not going to be managed and controlled by a person, although not saying that people don't create sloppiness here and there in the way they do their code, but you really have to the governance we have in place in terms of application security currently needs to remain, and it needs to be able to scale. Then I still think the conversation we were having earlier about upfront being left of all of this and making sure that we're designing it properly, and that the AI models that they're going to use are set up for success. One of the challenges I've seen in using them myself is that if you're not specific enough, you're not going to get the outcome you want. So being able to do that threat modeling, that design, the security architecture work, really setting very crisp and clear requirements are the upfront governance, I would say, that really drive better outcomes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing that we haven't touched on yet is kind of the concept of secure AI development and secure usage of AI, but also kind of adversaries are leveraging AI and even kind of attacking AI. Jacob, at the beginning, you mentioned kind of model poisoning as a kind of emerging risk that's top of mind. What are some of the things that we should be mindful of as far as adversarial use of AI and new technologies, and how do we defend against those? Brad, I'll go to you first.
Oh, I kind of want to hear from Jacob on this. I think he's got some good ideas, but I do want to come back to it in a moment.
So thank you, Brad, for put me on the spot there. So I think about it in two ways. I mean, the framing I put earlier is the one, right? We have the model poisoning and the way the models we actually use. So it's like this dependency risk we have, a third-party risk we have by using open source model versus some data we've either trained or has been trained outside, and how that manifests in particular vulnerabilities within the code. The other one is that which has got me a little bit more concerned because I really haven't been able to think of the, what is the realm of possibility here is the actual use of AI in your deployed product. And how does that, how do you set the boundaries to maintain security in there appropriately? Or is it wide open? Or do you have some data that can be accessed if you make the right inferences? And I don't think we've even begun to see the attacks that can happen into a model like that, right? I'd actually be really interested to see what ChatGPT and these big open LLMs have seen as people trying to extract information from them. That would be interesting to break that out and do some research on that. But how is that going to manifest in your own company, in your own products, in your, like, I think in Brad and my world, your own medical device that sits on a patient? How are you really going to manage and control that? That's where my bigger concern is. A little more generic of an answer, but that sort of unknowns is what's kind of keeping me awake right now.
Yeah, I think me as well. I get caught up on this point. I'm not quite sure how to enunciate it, but our adversaries are getting much smarter and much faster. Now, that was happening before AI, as I think more threats have become more nation state focused as opposed to being, driven by the 12-year-old in mom's basement. But what AI is going to do is ratchet up that threat much faster. It's going to enable people with fewer resources to become more powerful at a much more rapid pace than they were before. And even though our adversaries are becoming more nation state oriented and declining in quantity while increasing in quality, this might make the internet a pretty significantly more dangerous place. And again, just coming back to how we're spending our time, right? We have to be surgical with what we're doing.
Linda, what's your perspective on this kind of adversarial AI and emerging threats?
Yeah, and I think Brad hit the nail on the head where, the adversaries are going to be doing it a lot faster. So it's where can we go, are we, shifting left far enough of the, threat modeling up front, but also it's a matter of understanding and getting people to understand. So being more deliberate about where they're using it, what they're doing with it. Again, I had mentioned the blind trust, but not just blindly trusting it and understanding it and really understanding your systems.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, we don't have too much more time, but I do want to kind of, go around the room and get kind of closing thoughts and statements that, it's obvious from this conversation that, practices from the past need to evolve with these the emerging paradigms of AI and other kind of new technologies. So I guess just going around the room, what's that one message you want to leave our audience with on how to rethink the future of effective software security? Linda, I'll start with you.
I think, I don't know that a lot changes per se, but it's being more deliberate, putting through understanding what's coming out of the tools, and then just putting the controls in all the right places. From a security perspective, we need to figure out how to do that to enable developers to still move fast because they're going to do it.
Jake, next.
You say Jacob?
Jacob here.
Okay. So that Linda's point is right on, and that kind of falls into mine as well. Is you have to educate yourself, and that really means you have to lean into AI and not only understanding how you can leverage it yourself, because if developers are doing it, security professionals can do it as well to some degree, right? We all discussed there are some boundaries that you have to stop at because you really needs a human to be there. But take a lot of those long-running processes, those really arduous, data-driven analysis, and put those through AI while using your time to do what's more important for driving security of the products. That's one side. And then the other one is continue to educate yourselves on these risks. Like really get involved with the community, start keeping an eye on what's happening out there, try to get into some research on how security researchers are attacking AI so you can understand that for your business as well. It's coming. You have to just be prepared for
it. Brad?
Yeah, I think every security practitioner needs to be looking in the mirror right now, asking yourself, as my developers evolve over the next 1 to 5 years, whatever our time span is, as their practices change, what am I going to have to do to keep up with them, run alongside them, be a good partner? And how is that going to have to be different from what it is today? are my tools going to have to change? Is my knowledge going to have to change? And then ask yourself critically, do I know how to do that? And if you don't, then I think there's a conversation we need to start here in the security community. And I'm excited to see that happen.
And if they don't, what resources do you recommend?
It's going to be different for everyone, right? We have to come together as a community and talk more about how we can work together as a Western security apparatus, if you will, to be a better defense of the internet. And I think that's still waiting to happen.
All right. Well, that's a good place to wrap it up. Linda, Brad, Jacob, really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here and sharing your predictions about the future, insights on what's changing, what's staying the same. I'll hand it back over to Karina, who will be taking us on to the next panel.
Thank you, Devin.
Glad to be here.